Hey, everybody. Ryan and Seth here from Go to Market Advisors, continuing our educational series on how to empower frontline leaders. We just released our management methodology, which we believe is kind of the first true manager methodology that there is in the market. There's sales methodologies, there's forecasting frameworks. There really isn't anything for managers to know how to identify and manage risk in a consolidated and easy way to use. So we released that. Check that out on managermethodology.com. These next couple of videos, we want to educate a little bit further on our point of view on this, but more importantly, what's going on in the market and how is this going to impact you as a leader? And also, if you're a first-time manager, how do you think about your role and the evolution of it and what's going to look like? This video in particular, we wanted to chat kind of about, do you really know what your managers are doing? Ryan and I kind of get to audit, quite a lot of businesses. And through that auditing process, we start to look and validate what a leader thinks is happening. And oftentimes most leaders don't validate what managers are doing. But Ryan, why don't you talk a little bit more about what we're seeing from organizations and this assumption of what managers are doing and are not doing?
Yeah, so I think for most organizations, the leaders are working. So I think just state that first and foremost, we're not implying that managers aren't doing something. What we're suggesting is that what they're doing is not consistent amongst even themselves. And then maybe secondarily is not anchored to a proven framework for success. So let me talk more specifically. So every week, guaranteed, your sales managers log into their CRM and look at a dashboard, right? But what are they looking for? For a lot of organizations, if you ask your 5 managers, they might give you 5 different answers. That's kind of the point we're trying to make here is there's nothing wrong with the dashboard. The question, though, is a dashboard should equip the viewer of the dashboard with information that tells them something. Right. Outside of timing, a lot of managers just do their own thing. What we're suggesting is that doesn't make sense. There's only so many data points that really matter, and each data point should tell you something specific about what you should now instruct or guide or coach the rep to do. For most organizations, just that simple thing I just said doesn't happen. So First and foremost, do they even know what to look at? Then if they see it and the metric is X or versus Y, do they know what that means?
Right.
So that's what we're describing is there's a void between equipping leaders with data. We think organizations have done a great job with that. They have more data than they know what to do with. It's not a data problem. It's a data fluency problem, and it's a data thresholding problem. So when they look at a metric like time and stage and it's X days, do they know what that should mean to them? And as an organization, have you defined what's red or green? So if I've been in stage for 5 days, is that good? Is 10 days bad? If you haven't defined that, what that really means in practice is your managers are just doing whatever they think makes sense, which in some cases hopefully is good. In other cases might not be because of their lack of experience. And therefore you don't have a consistent organizational approach on how to manage deals, which is the job of a manager.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece of why we built this framework in the first place is we've noticed the wild inconsistencies of all managers about how they approach identifying risk. Just that alone. So how do I look at a report and say, this deal is risky based on X? If you ask a manager predominantly what they do, they validate information from a rep. Well, you have tools to do that. Gong can do that. Clary can do that. There's a lot of tools that can validate information. So as a manager, what's the point of your job then? People would say coaching. My argument would, you can't coach if you don't know what you're looking at. And so that's really what we want to help solve for is for leaders to go, okay, what am I actually looking at and trying to find? Because you don't need to inspect every single deal in pipeline to the nth degree. You need to inspect and get ahead of the risk for the ones that look like red flags.
Yeah.
If it's smooth sailing and it feels like a great fit, and you looking at the information and it seems positive, why continue to ask validating information on that? Go look at the ones that are a problem.
And I think there's a key point here. We want to be clear to everyone. We are under no impression, expectation that what we're providing is a magic wand or is perfect. What we're suggesting is that this creates some frameworks that you can work within that creates consistency and continuity amongst your team, focused on clarity of purpose. So just because we say that, time and stage should be under X days versus Y days, is that going to miraculously increase your win rate? No. But the consistency of every manager looking at every deal through the same organizational lens is a huge improvement. Because now, as an organization, rep to rep, manager to manager, you have shared learnings. But more importantly, as an executive, you are now equipping the managers to look at risk in a deal the way that you look at risk in a deal. So there's consistency. Because at the end of the day, they're going to review all these deals and they're going to submit a forecast based on your frameworks, whatever that is, best case, pipeline, commit, etc. That needs to mean the same thing to them as it does to you. And if you feel like your forecasts have to wildly change after submission, that is pure and objective evidence your process is broken. Because what you look at in finance and executives as risk should be the same lens that a manager looks at. And so if they submit a deal to you and you go, absolutely not, whatever you're looking at to come to that conclusion, you should educate the manager on. And for most organizations, you don't have a framework to do so, which is the whole point of Trap.
Yeah. So assuming that I agree with you on that, what's the point of all this? Like, what's the good and bad? Like, okay, so bad is the example of a manager goes in, looks at a report, doesn't see information from a rep, goes and validates next step, and tries to understand a little bit more information about what's taking place in the deal. They input that deal, and then they tell their boss, right? That's a loop that I've seen at plenty of organizations that managers do. And they think that's their job, is to go collect and validate information. To me, that's not the point of a manager. You don't need a manager for that. You can use a system for that. Yeah. So if we believe managers are important, which we do, and I think they're the linchpin to organization success, what is a good manager? How does that look different within a framework like Trap to kind of guide them?
Yeah, I think you really described it there. I think what we're suggesting, and kind of our tagline is turning sales managers into risk managers, is we are taking individuals that today functionally gather and condense information to manage risk. So what does that mean in practice? Today, a lot of managers collect information from reps, organize it in a concise way, and spit it back to somebody else. Yeah. It's not the role of management. Your job is to identify problems that could prevent you from winning, and then equipping your reps with a plan of action to go fix that.
Yeah.
That's your job. Find a problem, fix a problem, yield greater success. And you should be looking through the same lens that the executives of the organization look through. When they see a deal, an executive's not involved, that doesn't have a high probability of winning. The manager should think and see and inspect the exact same way. But for most organizations, you have not equipped your managers to do so. That is the point of Trap, is to give you a tool set that says, okay, now I've got a measuring tool to say, I got these in the bad column, these in the good column. The culmination of that means this deal is likely to win or likely not.
Yeah,
and
I think
now what to do about it.
Right. And the majority of managers that go into the role, right, they're usually high performing reps. Everybody knows that story. And the majority of directors now and VPs were also the same thing. But nobody along the way, some of them intuitively learned it. Others maybe got taught from good leaders. But majority of managers have never been taught how to manage. You're not running the deal anymore. You're not looking at, all the details in extreme detail. You need to zoom out now. And the problem with, and what we're trying to help fix, is the bad managers are still zoom in. Hey, what's the next step? Or did they respond to that email? Or did they this? when clearly, the deal's been in the same stage for 2 months. This isn't going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
This is a dead opportunity.
Dig into that a little bit. So I think emotionally, everyone understands zooming in, zooming out conceptually.
Yeah.
Practically explain what that means. So if you're a zoom in manager, what does that look like? If you're a zoom out manager, what does that look? Because I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. I think the zooming in manager is the person who's looking at where they're at without the further context of what's taking place and what needs to go forward. So if I'm a zoom in manager, I may look at a deal that's in stage 3. It's after a demo. Hey, we presented a proposal. We're asking the rep, hey, how do they respond to the proposal meeting? Oh, what great. Seth, it looks like, we're really going to push forward. They seem really happy with pricing. And then all of a sudden we get ghosted for 3 weeks. And then we're asking the rep the same going zoom in, like, hey, what's the next steps after the pricing proposal? What do they want to do? And he goes, oh, well, they're going to take some time to digest internally. Another 3 weeks goes by and they're asking the same thing. Instead of zooming out and going, we presented a proposal to them without actually understanding their business. And right after a demo that was an emergency from a person who's a director, a good manager will go, ooh, this isn't really the signs of a good buying process. Somebody who immediately wants pricing, who just wants to see a demo, and who isn't giving any information. A good manager go, this is really risky. And they would have caught it 2 months before, after the first proposal meeting, to go, hey, Ryan, these signs are a little bit too quick. There's risk in that. Let's get ahead of what they're really trying to do. It feels like they're just trying to get pricing, which is not a good thing for us and is not a real deal.
I think the other thing that I would add to that is, I think what we're calling the zoom out manager, or someone that has a process, is they are always taking time to compare that specific deal to success of the past. Zoom in managers, they're living in the moment. It's what did Joe say? What did Susan do? What email happened? And they're way down in the weeds. A effective manager that's zoomed out, looking at the bigger picture, is saying, in the last 10, 20, 50 deals that we've won, does this look like it, smell like it, feel like it? And if it doesn't, where and why? So the last deal you won when you presented pricing, what happened after that? Was it an immediate response? Did you present it to an executive versus a lower level person? Did they respond positively and they start negotiating, or did they ghost you? Those things are what you're trying to see as a manager, to say, this is on track or off track. But it's abstracted from the specific situation of Susan, Joe, whoever you're talking to, whatever company it is, to where have we seen the successful sequence of events that has led us to a one deal?
It's, in my opinion, it's taking the emotions out of looking at deals. Every rep and manager is emotional because that's tied to dollars. I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there before, where we get tied up because we built a relationship with somebody and believe that they are to be trustworthy in the information they're giving us. Anybody who's sold long enough knows the information you're getting from people is half true at best. Some people are truthful in what they're saying, majority aren't. And so you have to have an objective way to look at reality, to go, what is really taking place here? And then as a leader, you only have so much time in the day to get ahead of those deals, right? If you have 5 reps and they each get 20 deals each, you can't help those reps on all the deals. You only can find the deals that look like risk to you, that also look like a potential close, to go and get ahead of it. So the good and the bad here is, the bad's going to continually look at little details and probably likely manage the late stage deals, which is a big problem because your number is usually going to be hit from those early stage deals that progress quickly. And so you have to have a way to objectively look at risk, and then you need a way to go and baseline that. I think that's the good managers, being able to baseline it of like, hey, if this deal's been in stage for 45 days, Ryan, I love that you think this is going to progress, but I'm not seeing any signs of it.
So that's a good point. So I think, again, we're trying to give you a compare and contrast so you can kind of get your head wrapped around what is the difference, right? So I'm using trap. What does that mean? I think a poor manager, a weak manager who doesn't use a framework, they're driven by emotion. They're focused on their own and their rep's own activities. My rep sent a follow-up. My rep called. My reps texted. That's a weak manager. A strong manager is letting the facts and the actions speak for themselves. If you have someone who's a serious buyer, they will reach out to you. If you have someone who's in the serious buying process, they will respond. You've got to look at the objective data, unemotional. That's the point of Trap, is to provide a framework for how to do that. So instead of feeling about a deal, the deal is doing a thing, the prospect is doing a thing or not.
Right.
And that when you can do that, your accuracy goes substantially higher, because unfortunately, some of the best salespeople in the world sell themselves more than anyone else.
Yeah, 100%. And I think and a lot of managers get sold from their reps that this is actually taking place. But like we talked about, there's tools now where you can go and validate that. So there's no excuse for a manager not to be able to validate information. You have to get away from rep hearsay. And this is coming from a former rep. And there's a lot of stuff I used to tell my boss that I thought was true. And if I would go back and listen to those calls, I'm sure I was wildly off. Again, your job as a leader is to listen, understand, and then take action. It's not to just listen and understand and take notes and then go tell your boss. It's to take action, right? And that's the thing that we were trying to empower managers with, is a way to be able to take action. Because if you look at risk the same and you're just looking at late stage deals, you're never going to have the time to go and help a rep. You need a way to prioritize what's important to you.
Well, I think you make a good point. I think that
I make a lot of good points, Ryan, but sure.
I mean, every once in a while. I think a strong manager, and the purpose of this is not to bash reps, right? The purpose of this is to
nor managers, right?
Nor managers.
Selling is the hardest job.
But the point is that as a manager, you should trust what your reps say, because for most people, they are telling you what they really believe. And remember, your interests are aligned. If they win, you win. Everyone's on the same page, right? So you need to trust them, but you need to verify. To Seth's point, it's not about rep hearsay. Well, the rep said this, I'm just going to regurgitate that upstream. You need to go validate. And with the tools today, like Gong, there's no excuse for you not to hear what the customer said. So my rep said the meeting went well. They want to move forward. Okay, great. Let me skip to the end of that last call. Let me listen to the last 10 minutes, see if my conclusion from what the prospect actually said is the same as what the rep heard, because maybe the rep had a little bit rosier glasses than we would like them to say, or maybe they hinted at a concern that we need to mitigate. But it's your job to go say, I think my rep believes I'm here. Do I, from reviewing the information from the prospect, agree? Or is there just a slight agreement, but a slight disagreement, and then you can go address that? But that's your job. If all you're doing is regurgitating what the rep says, you're not doing your job properly. And for the managers that are doing that today, many of them don't know how to do any different. Yeah. And that's the purpose of this, is to equip them with tools. If you're a new manager, you've never done this before, you don't know what to look at, you're just kind of going back into rep mindset. The purpose of this tool set is to give you instructions and say, no, this is now a new skill. You've got to step out. You've got to look at this in an aggregate way. And this is step-by-step how you can do that.
Yeah. And in the majority of what's given to managers is coaching on coaching of reps. Yeah. There's very few things that are given to a manager saying, this is for you. Yeah. This is your framework. This is your way of operating day to day. It is not you and what you need to do with your rep. It's what you need to learn and you need to understand. Because if you want to progress in your career as a manager, go to a director and a VP, you have to take a step back and look objectively at what's going on, because that's how you make decisions, right? As a CRO and a VP of sales or a CFO, you make decisions on aggregately what's going on based on the historicals and the signs that it's showing you. You don't look and say, this is the next step of the deal and this is exactly what's happening. Obviously that's a component of it, but you're taking a step back and looking at it. And so if you're thinking about, how can I progress in my career as a manager and how can I get really good at this, is coaching is a part of it, is how can I be a good coach and make sure that whatever I'm empowering the rep to go do, that I'm doing it in a way that the rep can hear me and take action on it. But before you can even get to that, you as a leader have to have an objective way to see the playing field. Yeah. And if you don't, to be honest, like most people are, you're winging it. And sure, you're going to have some success. Sure, you're going to have some quarters. But the reality is you're not going to be able to be consistent because you don't have enough time in the day to do it. And so the more that you can learn to have a framework to look at the playing field and going, okay, where is there a problem? What historically has that problem shown me? And is it even worth taking action on? Or is this deal just dead? Is it not worth it? Or is it too far along the process? And like, frankly, it's a toss up at this point. Like, there's not much else we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the essential part of this, right? I think we have, for many organizations, there is a huge assumption that the people that you're guiding as an executive understand what you mean and understand how to apply it.
Right.
And what we're saying is that in the void of ambiguity and, just to your point, winging it, we're providing a framework that's instructional guidance. So now when I say inspect your pipeline, what I'm not looking for is a summary of next steps. What I'm looking for is you as a manager to figure out what could stub our toe and cost us a deal and go fix that problem. That's what I'm asking you to do. I think what people hear is summarize some information and tell me where things are at. No. You need to be managing outcomes, not just speaking the news of the deal.
Yeah.
And for most organizations, if you look honestly at yourselves, you've never done that. You've never guided someone on how you want that to work. And so when people submit a forecast to you, the logic that they're using to determine whether a deal goes in this bucket or that bucket is just their gut. There's no process to it. There's no structure to it. And so that's why you have wild inconsistency in forecast accuracy. That's why one manager might be good, one manager struggling. They're all doing it differently. And for you to create what everyone wants, which is this revenue machine of predictable, consistent performance, you should all be doing best practices, right? But if no one knows what those are, no one's communicated that, the odds of you accidentally stumbling into it are zero.
Yeah. So the application of this, we've kind of touched on some components of it, but really haven't addressed, okay, if I'm a manager and I want to improve, a framework is only as good as it's being applied, right? Sales methodology, for example, is only good if a rep uses it and it's consistent, right? Same thing with a manager framework. So talk about kind of the application of it, because I think there's, some critical pieces. We talked about the inspection piece. I think that's step one. That's really like, hey, how do I make sure that if I'm looking at a deal, that I'm not just looking at random details and, spot checking certain things and looking at next steps, but that I have kind of a methodical way I can go about that. Again, it can be condensed. It can be, further brought out depending on what you're looking to do. But you need, right, an inspection. And then talk about kind of the rest of the applications of it. Because, again, if I'm a manager, I'm trying to learn, what are some of the things that I should be thinking about doing that would, be useful for this?
So a lot to unpack there. I think that the simplest place to start is TRAP is a acronym that stands for timeline, which is 4 data points associated with time. Realism, which are 4 data points focused on use cases and past success. Activity, pretty self-explanatory. And then people, again, pretty self-explanatory. So it's 16 data points. Certainly you could have 18, you could have 22, you could have 12. I think that's less important. What's most important is that there's a framework to it and there's consistency. And it's not just saying that, okay, so timeline, that we just look at how long the deal's been around. That's not the point. The point is we use time as a barometer of engagement and as a barometer of successful progress. So that's what time is. Now, we marry that, that's more or less an objective, that's a goal, with some thresholds to determine whether I'm on track, off track. And that's measured against your organization's success. So let's make this practical. Let's say that you have a 100-day sales cycle on average, okay? And in that 100-day sales cycle for your organization, you've got 5 stages that a deal goes through. So simple math to give you just a threshold is you should be going through each stage about every 20 days. So as a manager, I should look at that and use that 20-day mark as kind of a healthy barometer of, are we progressing generally in the realm of where we've had success? So what that translates into an action is, if I look at my deals and the in-stage time for my deals is, 10, 11, 12, 13 days, those seem okay. If I now look at a deal and the in-stage is 47 days, we're way off track. So now I can use that as an indicator to go inspect. So now I need to go look at that deal. What was the last time we talked to them? What happened during that call? Has there been any engagement since that point? Did something change? Because it feels to me like we're way off track. And that could be, at this point, a warning sign that this may not be a real deal anymore. So the idea is, we're giving you what to look at. We're giving you a threshold to determine whether is this in the good column or the bad column. And then that begins an action process on behalf of the manager to go inspect that. Then when you culminate that across all of your deals, it creates, we do like a visual heat map of it, but it gives you a way to stack rank the risk of all your deals, which then should flow into your forecast. Obviously, high risk deals shouldn't be committed and low risk deals should be. So now we at least have a consistent, objective way to walk through the deal review process, deal inspection process, and then forecast submission.
Yeah. And I think it's another way to add to that you can equip your reps with your train of thought of how can they objectively look at their book of business. Yeah. And it becomes, again, getting away from the emotions of sales. Yeah. Yes, every rep thinks there's that person's really good for it and they're going to bring it in. But you have to look at objectively going, okay, we're not going to commit this deal if I'm seeing red flags all over the place. But to Ryan's point, you need to have an ability to see what those red flags are. And so that's kind of the whole mentality is like, okay, if you're inspecting deals, you're probably going to do a couple different things in inspecting deals. You're probably going to do a quick spot check of like, is this deal real? You might do a further inspection of like, are we going to win this deal? You can use Trap for both of those. I think there's a component of like, you could probably take timeline and activity, and that could be a component of what you do just to spot check things. And then as you have more time and you look at some more risk and you see some more red, you might take the realism component, you might take the people and dig into those two in particular to see, okay, is this, is the pain really there? Is it really a critical event? Are we starting to get more and more people involved in this deal as it progresses, or is it still that one person? You can start to use different components of that to make it real. And then to Ryan's point, the end goal is to give you a heat map component of all of your pipeline and risk and consolidate it down for you to be able to go, okay, these are committed for these reasons. These are not. These are upside that we need to have some work on that we're going to go chase. And then I, as a manager, I'm going to spend time on my upside stuff. I'm going to go help my rep with those deals that are risky, but I can't do that across the whole board. So that's kind of some simple ways to apply this. There's also a lot other applications of it as you look towards forecasting and managing your team. But in the simplest way, it's a way to deal inspect and both components. And then it's a way for you to get ahead of potential revenue loss. Like that's the whole objective of this, is you a leader to get ahead of that, but you need a plan on how to do it.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a couple important things. One, that like anything, you should stair step your way into this. Yeah. It's going to be, we would highly encourage you to start with one letter, specifically being time, to adopt Trap. Don't try to do it all at once. If you're a manager who's just winging it today, you'll drown in the added volume of things to think about. Start small. It's 4 data points, one topic. Let's just look at time as a barometer of engagement. There's 4 data points to look at. Here's how to look at them. Here's how to use thresholds. Just start there. So work your way into that kind of maturity. Secondarily, I think, Seth, you touched on a key point here, which is our intention organizationally is to drive strategic alignment. When executives and finance look at risk, when managers look at risk, when reps look at deals, the mindset of what could be a problem should be universal. Yeah. And when it is, it creates powerful alignment that everyone's thinking and looking in the same way so that you can attack the problem together. I think a lot of the friction that happens today in sales teams is you got parties, internal parties that don't understand each other. And so you kind of talk past each other and it creates a lot of friction. How many meetings have we been in with forecasting where people are like, that's not real, this is not real? That should tell you something's wrong. If people are submitting what they think is a good deal and you think it's a bad deal, the two of you don't understand each other. So the purpose of this is to create some alignment on what are we agreeing are problems in deals, and how should we then, as a result, tackle them together.
Right.
And then when you bring executives into a deal, when you ask for a manager's help on a call, now everyone understands what you're there to do because you know what the potential risks are.
Yeah, and I think what we ultimately, we use the term risk manager because I think component of that has a relation to finance. And if you look at how finance manages cash and how they think about forecasting and planning, salespeople should think the same way. There's a reason why finance people are usually more accurate than salespeople on their forecast. Is because they're looking at historicals and they have a baseline to say, this feels real, even though somebody else is committing this or not. And to your point, I think you made a really good one about the leadership component is every leader has something in their head about how they discount what's coming in. Right? We've talked about this before that, as a leader forecast, another leader is taking that and then submitting their own forecast. But they're never communicating back down to a manager of why I don't think that's going to happen. And so you basically have this wasted cycle of time and energy going, well, let me verbal diarrhea to my manager what this deal is going. I'm going to condense down that verbal diarrhea into 2 sentences to my leader. My leaders then condense that to 1 sentence and give it to a CRO. Instead of just cutting all that wasted time and going, here's what we think about these opportunities objectively. And then you can overwrite that as a manager or as a rep, if you feel super strongly about that and you have legitimate reasons. But there's a process to that so that the time spent isn't around regurgitating information. It's around taking action, getting ahead of something. Otherwise, you're literally just wasting time going on one-on-ones, team meetings, forecasting meetings. They're literally just a waste of time if you follow the process of, let me just regurgitate and tell me about these deals, what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this before too. The crazy thing is you're doing this every week, every single week.
Yeah.
If you're not more accurate in Q2 than Q1, you're doing this wrong.
Yeah.
Period. End of sentence.
And it's because a majority of people have been rinsing and repeating forecasting and being a manager for the last 20 years. Since Salesforce existed and they started building reports and dashboards, I don't think forecasting has gotten any better. No, I think it's probably gotten worse. Because we've got away from the fundamentals that people have learned and taught and just said, oh, well, everybody understands it because they have a lot of information.
Yeah. And I think the key thing is we're not suggesting that we have some revolutionary perspective here. What we're suggesting is for the first time, we took the things that live in our head and things that we've seen in the field and wrote them down.
Right.
And that's what most companies are either unwilling, incapable, or don't have the time to do. But what you're missing is your team desperately needs it. They don't understand what you know. They don't have the experiences you have. They don't have the perspective that you have. And so they don't have that worldview, right?
And we've tried to take this simple route, which was never really meant for leadership, and said, if we give somebody a sales methodology, they will be able to forecast more accurately. Yeah. That was the perception, right? Most people won't say that. So, oh, well, it's for deal qualification for them to run the consistent sales process. But a consistent sales process is only to forecast accurately, right? That's ultimately the plan of that is how can I take and get 100 reps to do the same thing in a consistent way that I can try to predict the future, right? And I think we've just lost the point, which is sales methodology is a great thing and really helpful for sales reps. But a manager is not a sales rep. And when you ask people about deals, 99% of reps don't talk about the sales methodology, nor do managers. So why do you overemphasize that as the importance for your team on how to forecast accurately? Because it's not.
Yeah, and I think what happened was people expected, hoped, or desired that a sales manager could take a sales methodology given to a rep, take a forecasting framework that was given to them by executives, and connect the dots in the middle. And what we're saying is they can't. An experienced manager probably could, if you've had a lot of time and seat and you really learn these things and master them. You could probably create your own version of trap and your own logic and your own process. But what we have in the market today is most managers have less than a couple years experience. They do not have the experience to connect those dots. And so what you have is a bunch of people doing their best.
Yeah.
But it's whatever they come up with on any given day.
And the majority of managers I know are busting their butt to try to make it work, try to figure out solutions. They are working harder. But it's not a component of working harder. It's a component of understanding the equation and working smarter. And I think part of this equation has always been, well, let's forecast more accurately. But if you ask people, they don't really want to forecast accurately because that's visibility, right? And that's accountability of going, oh, well, you're way off of your number. Now I got to go tell my boss where I'm under. Now I got to go tell the board. Nobody really, truly wants to forecast more accurately. What they want to is be able to objectively say, what do I need to go and get ahead of to make sure that I hit my number? That's the whole point of forecasting. It was never to be accurate because no one wants accuracy. They want a plan to go, okay, if we have this gap, what does marketing need to do? What does business development need to do? What do my sales managers need to do that they can go and help a rep get ahead of potentially these challenges to bring in some more revenue because it looks like we're going to need it. That was the whole point of the game that everybody's playing. They just never took the time to understand it.
I just want to be careful. We're not painting all sales leaders as liars. That's not the point here. What I think was happening is it was a defensive coping mechanism for not knowing how to fix the problem. So instead of segmenting and editing your pipeline in a less rosier point of view, they played defense and tried to do the shotgun approach by just having volume.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep all the deals around. I'm not sure which one we're going to win, but I need to keep them in play because one of these 10 deals is going to happen and whatever. What we're saying is we're giving you a way to know. We're giving you a way to have really clear, objective insight that you are on track or off track and what to do about it so that you don't have to just keep that bucket of deals around. You know which deals are at what stage. And maybe more importantly, you know what to do in each and every deal.
Right.
And so does your rep.
Yeah, it's moving away from it. I wasn't saying it as like a negative connotation. It's like people are lying in that. More so of the idea of to get away from the idea of things just slipping that we know aren't real. And then continually the evolution in the cycle of deal slipping, all of a sudden random close loss and things like that, where it's like, there are clear signs that you could have got ahead of to either potentially solve that deal or that deal wasn't real in the first place. And making sure that you're spending time in an appropriate way to not waste time chasing information. Like, how much time do you think is wasted from reps and from managers strategizing on a deal that is very clearly dead, but they keep talking about and keep committing it when it's like anybody who takes a step back and go, there's not a chance in hell this deal's coming in.
Well, we did a study, Seth, I don't remember this, but we did a study on the impact of losing faster. And what I think a lot of people don't give enough attention to is the burned time, energy, and money to lose has a huge impact on not only how many deals you win, but the capacity of number of deals you can win. Because if I'm a rep and I'm working 10 deals or whatever it is, depending on the size of your, the customer, I can't work more. But if I get rid of 3 deals that are dead anyway, I now have 3 more at bats that could be wins.
Right.
And if you do that over the course of a year, mathematically, you could do 2 times the revenue by just learning how to disqualify and walk away from what is a dead deal. Yeah. So the point of this exercise is there is a ton of experiential scars that we're bringing to the table thanks to our experience and thanks to a lot of input from our portfolio of customers and clients to say, okay, here's some lessons learned. Here's how you pick up on that early. Here's the early warning signs to go, ooh, something doesn't feel right about this. I need to go shore that up. And if you shore it up, then great. You now know you solved a problem that could have been an issue with you winning. If you can't solve it, you more quickly know that this is a dead end road and I can get off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you learned some things to go and apply. I think we'll continue to release stuff around the trap and how to apply it and how to use it day to day. The real goal of this is to truly empower frontline leaders to turn into risk managers and get ahead of potential lost revenue, and at the same time mature managers into future leaders. This problem that we're seeing today is kind of exacerbated because nobody spent the time to equip managers on how to think. They assume that all managers could just look at somebody executing and then be able to understand it. And, we've unequivocally seen that's not the case.
Yeah.
So we'll be in touch with some more videos. Stay tuned and looking forward to some further conversations. Cheers.